All right, welcome to Talking Filthy. I'm here with my good friend Rich. We're about to fuck it up, Park and Bilby style. We'll talk about what that means to the new generation of cops when you're back 20 years ago working the South Side on midnights. But we're going to do a little intro here real quick, and then we'll kick it off. All right, Rich, what's up, dude? I'm good, man.
What's up, Danny? How are you, man?
So you've had a busy summer, from my understanding, whether it's at home or at work.
Yeah, man, it's been always moving.
So for our listeners and viewers, which is growing and it's awesome, our goal of this podcast is to help other cops, period. That's it. Actual cops out there working, doing their thing. And so Rich has an extensive background. He's been out there probably coming up on 20 years now, give or take. 17.
Yeah, 17 in October.
Lengthy career in the streets. Like, you did not run and hide somewhere or jump from assignment to assignment like I did. Yeah, you stayed out there and patrol. You stayed out there at midnights for a long time, too, down on the South Side, right?
Love it, man. So 11 years of Team One Midnights is what it has added up to thus far. Currently not on mids, but in a special assignment, which keeps me out in the street at least 50%.
And you are a supervisor now and a tactical support unit supervisor, correct?
Correct. So I'm one of two full-time supervisors on our tactical team. Kind of the way that we have it structured currently is that we have a full-time element that is always out there in the field, day-to-day tactical things that come up, anywhere from that to hunting down, last night's homicide suspect, to, if there's nothing else brewing, shagging a level 4 or a low priority loud music call. We kind of help out wherever we can. And so I'm one of two supervisors for that unit.
What we want to cover today a little bit is a few things, just health and wellness of a police officer in general, but specifically if you are a supervisor, if you're in a leadership role, if you're managing other cops. I personally think if you give a shit about your job as a supervisor, there's an extensive amount of added stress that the normal single solo officer does not experience, because as a supervisor, you're responsible now. You own that at a much higher level. What's your feeling on that?
Well, so you're absolutely right. You should own that. The problem that we run into is not everybody does. So I had the fortunate experience of being a field training supervisor, which means I trained a bunch of sergeants as they were newly promoted. And that worked out to somewhere right around 20 sergeants. And I kind of, developed my spiel over the years that I was doing that. And the number one thing that I came up with really early on about supervision is it is not about you.
Say that again.
Everything you're doing, it is not about you. Everything that you're doing is for them. It is no longer about you.
And that's a heavy burden. You have to put your selfish thoughts and actions aside, and you have to actually make a conscious decision every day. And I wasn't always the best at it, and I think all of us have our moments where you're kind of like, I lost sight of what I was doing after 6-7 years as a supervisor. But yeah, you have to be selfless.
So, I don't say that, to kind of wear like a badge of honor or anything like that. But if you want your people to respond and react and carry themselves, the way that they should, well, you got to put the time into them. And that detracts from you doing the things that you might want to do. And so I spent more time saving people from themselves, because
Right.
these
With a
hard
good
chargers
heart.
want to go
Yeah.
out there and they want to kick over every wall. Absolutely. Absolutely. But sometimes you got to pull back the reins on them and you got to show them, the more circuitous path, as it were.
Yeah.
I know you get that one. But yeah, that, to go back to your previous point, that is a compounding stressor in your life. If you actually give a fuck about your people, it's a second family. It's a second set of kids, and that's a real thing.
Yeah, it is.
If you actually care.
And the dynamics of managing people. When I was out at the academy and we were doing sergeants' academies and whatnot for new supervisors, I would tell them, imagine the craziest shit a person would do that you think they wouldn't never do, a cop. And they're like, okay, and they think about it, and I go, they will do it. Unfortunately, sometimes it will happen. Now,
100%.
and that could be good and bad too, The craziest stuff you saw, you'd never imagined that young kid doing the things they did on a call heroically, because they're quiet and they don't say much and they don't do much, and they shock you in that way. And then your most squared away, cop does something, maybe it's just a brain fart and they leave their gun in a bathroom while they're, doing their thing, and, they got to deal with that. It was an accident. So all of that stuff causes a lot of stress on a supervisor, because for me, I don't know how you felt, giving out discipline sucks. Even termination of an employee sucks, and it puts a lot of stress on the supervisor. Obviously, the employee that's receiving it, that's a no-brainer, but the supervisor, you're the one doing it.
100%. It can be a stressful thing, and I had a pretty significant run with discipline the first 12 months that I was a supervisor, and I had everything from the low level, like how I backed into a pole in a Circle K parking lot, to like, hey, we're going to put this guy down. We're going to terminate him. All in the first year that I was a supervisor. So I've gotten to experience a lot of that, and you really stop and think about, this is this person's livelihood. This is their career. Going to this person's house and taking their credentials from them in front of their family.
Yeah.
That's not cool. That sucks. But if it's the right thing to do, if it's the best thing for the people left and right of you, the other people that you're watching out for,
yeah,
then that's what needs to be done. And then that specific circumstance was one of those. So
right.
We are better off without that person.
It's a hard thing to manage as a supervisor, because it does keep you awake, or it should. Maybe some supervisors, there's a few out there, they probably, doesn't bother them, and they probably didn't even do the work in the first place. Someone else probably had to do it, but whatever. So that stress, that's one component I found that was stressful as a supervisor that adds up. And then I think, conversely, since you are in the middle as a supervisor, dealing with your bosses can also add a lot of stress, because I think the rank of supervisor, at least for our agency and probably many others, you're right in the middle. You're not command, and you're not a line troop necessarily.
100%. So, the best way that I found to deal with, the rank above me, and even the one below me for that matter, is you got to go out of your way to build a relationship. And in my opinion, it's a lot easier, or at least in my experience, it's a lot easier to build that relationship with the men and women, they're out in the field, because we speak the same language. You know what I mean? Somebody told me a long time ago, we could smell our own kind, right? And we can. But when you got to build the relationship going up the chain of command, sometimes it's a crapshoot whether or not the other half of this is going to buy in. But again, sometimes, like I said earlier, it's no longer about you. So if you got to eat the humble pie, you got to eat the crow, so that your guys can ultimately get the things that they need, the training, the equipment, whatever, maybe some policy gets changed.
Yeah, for sure. You do this balancing act. And to me, one of the stress is it never lets up. And as a supervisor, you're either dealing with situations or people type things, or you're dealing with bosses and projects and demands coming in. And I think that really, it's the best job in the agency. I think it's also the most challenging job. To include the position you're in now, which I held for a year out there as a tactical supervisor, and I got the benefit of doing it pre-Minneapolis, when things had changed dynamically or dramatically over the last year. But that was the best job. But it was stress because you were doing some serious liability stuff where the potential for people to get hurt or die are extremely high all the time. And, you have to answer for that,
It's you're right. It is very stressful. It's a different kind of stress than running a uniform patrol squad. On the uniform patrol type, on the side of things, my stress level would be more like, hey, are these guys going to get hurt if I'm not there? They're very, very capable. You know the old unit I used to run with. You were part of that group at one point in time. Obviously not before I was there, but they're very capable. They're well-rounded. But the things that kept me up at night with that group are a lot different than what keep me up at night in my current assignment. And the things that keep me up at night with the current assignment, revolve more around, the political landscape of surrounding law enforcement and, the high value, let me rephrase that, the severity of the people that we are attempting to apprehend. Like, these aren't shoplifters. These are murderers. These are rapists, and it's going to go sideways sometimes. And we do our best to mitigate it. My counterpart is very, very smart, and I know that you know him. I'm not going to put his name out there, but he has a phrase. It's not risk elimination; it's risk mitigation. And, once you can kind of wrap your head around that and apply that a little bit more and be okay with it, it helps you sleep a little bit better. But it's always running in the background, man. It's like that bad app on your phone that you should have deleted.
Yeah, and it ain't going anywhere for a long time.
Yeah.
So we kind of established a little bit. You've had a lengthy career, worked midnights. Midnights, I think, shift work can bring an added wear and tear on your body, that sleep deprivation or the sleep cycle and all of that. And then your assignments after that add in as a supervisor an element of stress. So if you're going to get promoted out there, what advice are you given to new supervisors or people that are managing people? About them? How do they keep themselves in check as far as their head in the game, their mental stability, not just on the calls. I mean, just when you wake up, when you're headed to work as a supervisor right now or a new supervisor, what's your best piece of advice so that you don't burn out, that new supervisor doesn't burn out and blow up?
Yeah, I think number one is you have to legitimately, at minimum, like what you're doing. If you're not down for the cause, it's going to show, and eventually you're going to be miserable doing your job, and it's going to wear on your mental health, and it's going to wear on your physical health. You're not going to be sleeping. It really, one thing will lead to another really quickly. So I think first and foremost is you got to give it an honest chance. You got to give it a shot. And once you're kind of bought in, for whatever, look, not everybody wants to be, the lifer in the streets. I get that. Totally fine. We need people to do other things too. But a lot of the guys and gals that are getting promoted are coming from investigative backgrounds, and it's been a long time since they worked shift work. They haven't worked, that 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., schedule since they were brand new on the department. Establishing a routine is key, and I know that can be difficult to do with with kids and, your life outside of work. But if you're a zombie, 5 days a week, I guarantee you your life outside of work isn't going to be very productive or very meaningful because you're just going to be sleeping all the time. So I think establishing that routine first and foremost can really help somebody as they're transitioning into that role. It's just one less thing for them to have to be anxious.
That first year especially is a huge learning curve, and you get a massive amount of things shoved at you as a new supervisor. So I think routine and sleep and taking care of yourself and cleaning off your plate of unnecessary shit, personally and professionally. The one thing that I failed at is I piled more shit on. If you have known me any time at all, fuck it, bring it. I'm at the buffet, you know what I mean? I'm buffet of stress. Well, guess what? About 19 years in, it blew up and it broke and the fucking wheels fell off, and so hindsight being 2020, I wish I would have never taken on in some aspects. I'm very grateful that I got the opportunity to be a SWAT supervisor right after promotion, but I'm looking back at it going, was that the best choice for me professionally? And I don't know. I don't think it was, because I had a lot thrown on me, and I had a lot thrown on me by my chain of command. So I think that first year is where you really need to be dialed in.
Yeah, I think you're right. That first year is so key because you might be acclimating yourself to some type of a new shift. 2, you're acclimating yourself to a new job altogether. This might be your first time, leading people. This might be your first endeavor dealing with somebody that's 20 years younger than you. And that brings some challenges in and of itself. Trying to have a conversation with a 22-year-old about showing up to work on time.
Yeah.
That's
it's
a real
aggravating.
thing.
It's an added stress on you that as a supervisor, you're like, I can't believe I'm having this fucking conversation that, your fucking boots don't match. You're wearing 2 different shoes here. That I'm just exaggerating, but you get the point. It's just like, why am I spending my time on this? But you have to.
Yeah. So you're dealing with all these new things that are new to you when you just came from you just came from patrol, you just came from your investigative assignment where it was really just you and your caseload or just you and your beat. And now you're having to deal with, I'm putting out everybody's fires, including my own. And, yours, ultimately, they fall to the back burner. So there's a lot that goes into it that revolves around time management and utilizing resources that are available to you. Like if you have supervisor questions, you got to have some go-tos. You got to have some people that you trust. Like, hey, Danny, I've never dealt with this before. I don't know how to fucking get this kid to show up to work on time. Like I'm at a loss for words. Like, have you run into this? Usually you're going to have some peers, some friends, some go-tos that are going to help steer you in the right direction. And having that is important. It's also important to have that sounding board.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to vent. It's like when parents get together and they're all venting to each other about their own children. That's what it's like when supervisors get together. They're venting to one another about their subordinates.
It's interesting because this is the analogy. Everybody wants to be a gangster till it's time to do gangster shit. Everybody can do your job better than you until they have to do it, and then there's a different, so you do have to kind of take a step back and be a sounding board because the critical things that you thought about the supervisors that you worked under, now you're a supervisor, so you have this trust. And I'll be honest too, I thought I was pretty well rounded as a new supervisor. I had done a lot, seen a lot, and you will run into that first year, 2 years, some bizarre things, and not something that employees did, but just strange civil matters or whatever, and you're kind of in this position, and it can be stressful where these people are looking at you and they have high expectations of you and you don't have the answers. right away, and you got to come up with a very classy way to figure it out with them and guide them in the right direction, and that can be stressful too, I think.
I think it's really stressful because there's tons of shit that I don't know, right? And, like I said, I had a really senior crew, and they would teach me stuff all the time. And much like yourself, prior to me getting promoted, I had kind of been around the department for a while, worked all over the city, and had gotten to do some cool stuff on the tactical side as an officer. So I felt, really comfortable. But that first time somebody comes to you and they ask you a question, you're like, man, I really should know this and I don't know this. It's a humbling experience, but if you let your ego get in the way and you try to bullshit a bullshitter, because cops
they smell bullshit.
you're gonna lose that leadership capital right away. And I think, much like you just said, is let's find a way to solve this together, because you know what? I don't know the answer. And I think that response, probably goes a lot further with the people working for you than ultimately what is a
to
lot.
Mitigate some stress on your end, just eat it and own it and be like, look, man, I'll be honest, I never fucking seen this, but let's figure it out. And I think life will, if you try to beat around the bush and, play all these, games and all this other stuff, it isn't worth it. I think you're just adding more stress to you and your reputation and all of that, and as a new supervisor.
One of the most stressful things that I hear, people, they're concerned with, like, hey, like, it's my first night at being a sergeant or some type of supervisor, and I got to sit in front of roll call or briefing, whatever your agency calls it. And, that can be like a daunting task for some people. Like, they're sitting in front of this room full of seasoned cops, and they're like, they're the fresh meat, they're the brand new supervisor. And I know you've seen it, and you've seen it play out both ways. The guy or gal that goes in there with some humility and is just excited to kind of get after it and build some relationships, they're going to go much further, and they're going to have a much better time, opposed to the guy or gal that rolls in there super stripe heavy, acts like they know it all, doesn't want to take input from anybody.
Eaten alive.
They're going to get shut down.
Eaten alive eventually, yeah. So 100%. Stress mitigation that first year as a supervisor, get in a routine. One of the other things, and maybe you could elaborate on this, diet. I think food, I'm finding more and more data and research that your diet plays a huge role on how your body and mind reacts to the circumstances as a law enforcement officer, especially as a supervisor.
Yeah, man, you can't put Circle K food in your car and think it's going to run, at optimum levels when you need it to. You just can't. Doesn't mean that you got to be crazy and meal prepping every single day of the week, because I'll be honest, I don't do that either. But somewhere in between is probably the
what's your
sweet
go-to quick, cheap, inexpensive way to kind of get through the work week for food?
All right, so there's a progression to this, right? So back when you and I were working together, it was all salads and chicken and very measured, whatever. And probably the last 8 or 9 months, I've been doing a carnivore diet, which is basically I'm eating meat, I'm eating some cheese, I'm salting my stuff pretty heavily, drinking a lot of water, and drinking coffee. And so far, I feel great. I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't cheated on it, because I have 100%. But I find that I have a little bit more energy. Cognitively, I'm a little sharper, which is a huge benefit for me. And some of the inflammation in my joints, I was dealing with the shoulder thing for quite some time, kind of cleared itself up. And nothing else really changed other than the diet. So I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to go jump on this carnivore train or whatever. But rolling up to In-N-Out and smashing some Flying Dutchman is a pretty solid choice.
Oh, man. For me. So you mentioned coffee. This is Rich's Jam, the Mutiny. by the way. That's
It
our
is.
flagship coffee. Rich is in the shop, I don't know, about every 2 or 3 weeks grabbing coffee. But so
Gotta
do
re-up,
you,
man.
let's talk, one of the other things I'm kind of really looking at, and I want some insight from some people that have a little bit more knowledge, especially at our age, carbs seem to wreak havoc on the body. Too much of it. I'm finding a lot of research that's saying that. And then personally, cutting back on carbs has helped a lot. What's your feeling on that?
So I can only speak to how I feel. I grew up playing sports, athletics at a moderately competitive level, up until the time I was a cop, essentially. And I was always told, like, hey, carbs, you gotta have them. And when I was younger, felt great. The older I get, I'm just not down with feeling hungover after eating a couple pieces of pizza. So I think moderation is key. Currently, I'm not really doing any carbs at all because it doesn't fall in line with the carnivore diet. I will tell you now that I'm a lot more sensitive to them than I used to be, and that's in terms of like the way my gut feels and like overall gut health and bloating and stuff like that. So I can't sit here and say like they're horrible. I think some people tolerate them better, and I kind of happen to know where I fall in line with them. Is that
I agree with that. That evaluation in the sense of I also have the same issue, and I'm seeing other people. I have a lot of health conversations with people when I ask them about their coffee and why they come to us for low acid and digestive issues. And a lot of it is kind of, especially at the 40 years and older mark, carbs seem to be a very common denominator of agitation, and also just cloudy, foggy. You said hungover. I think, that's a good thing. So look, if you're in the business of law enforcement and you're 15 years in and you're hitting that 40, 45 mark, just consider what you're eating in your diet. Take a look at your carbs and evaluate that. And obviously, I think that's important. That carbs, man, just it seems it can really, too much of it can wreak havoc. And the cop food, the QT buffet raider, that shit is all carbs, man, and it's bad carbs too. It's greasy, and so anyway, I'm not gonna, everyone's diet is different, and their body reacts different. But just if you're feeling like dog shit at 40 and you got 15 years on, take a look at your carbs. That's definitely look at your diet, but take a look at your carbs. It's kind of what I'm really seeing a lot of stuff about.
Not only the diet, but look at what is your exercise program like? Are you even taking part in something?
Dude, I just did Tumamok the other day, and I haven't done it in years. And my daughter was whipping my ass up that thing. No, don't take me wrong. When I say did it, I walked up that thing. I'm no stud like you and run that fucking thing. And I was watching people run by me, and I was like, I'm getting fucking nauseous watching them. But anyway, I got out, and I'm doing something again. And that's an easy thing to do once you start getting older. Just get out and start, touching on the fitness thing a little bit. How much are you working out a week? Damn.
6 days.
Now, when he says Rich says he played a little sports. He was a fucking all-star collegiate athlete. So yeah, and he's 6'15" and 120 pounds, 2% body fat. So don't let him downplay it.
Yeah, tall and skinny for the win, man. So, no, being active is it's kind of twofold for me. One, obviously, you got to be physically capable to do this job, right? Like, I don't ever want to let anybody down. I don't want to not be able to, lift somebody out of the street that needs to get lifted out of the street. I don't want to be able to, not, break a window to crawl through my patrol car because I just got T-boned or something weird like that. But equally as important, and I would even probably say even more important, man, is my way to off-gas
Right.
stress.
I think that's where I was going with this, stress.
Yeah, so I can kind of, like I said, the stress related to this job, really no matter what assignment you're in, dude, you're carrying some baggage. Like, if you think you're not, you're just lying to yourself. You got to have a healthy outlet for that. And everybody's is different. But, what I found for me is, like, if I get a good workout in, get a good jiu-jitsu session in, whatever, it kind of brings me back down to my baseline and I'm good. It's my hit for the day until tomorrow. It's time for me to get my wake up, which is the next session, the next lift, the next run, or whatever. But it's important. And I tell these kids, these young new cops, you got to have a healthy outlet. There's all kinds of outlets you can have, and a lot of them are really bad for you. You can go home and smash 6 or 7 beers after a shift, and especially when you're in your 20s, you wake up the next day and be fine. That is a finite fix to a much larger problem. So, set your outlets up around something that's healthy, that's going to benefit you and keep you alive longer.
Diet,
might help
fitness, routine. One other thing I wanted to kind of touch on is if you're a new supervisor or a supervisor that's been on a while, and just maybe this will help you. This is one thing I didn't do. Some assignments, yes, you are on call, as you are right. I'm sure right now when the bell rings, you got to go. But there is a time to shut it off, and when I mean shut it off, don't answer phone calls, don't answer emails. Don't respond to anything. Like when you're getting ready to go to vacation with your family, it's vacation time. If you're a boss and your cops are going on vacation, don't bug them with shit. That's their time. You're doing more damage by asking, unless it's really important. I can only think of a few things that would be that crazy, but what's your feeling on that?
So, you and I, we talk pretty regularly. I mean, I was out of town, and I needed to be out of town last week, man. I needed to unplug. And
unplug.
When I say unplug, I text my counterpart, the other supervisor, and we both run pretty hard. And I was like, I'm off the grid, bro. I'll see you next week. And in June, he did the same thing. It was his family vacation time, and I covered for him. And while I was gone last week, he covered for me. And I go, if something really cool happens, let me know.
Yeah.
and that's about it. You know what I mean? So you have to step away.
It is.
I'll be honest, it is really hard. I could do a better job at that. But it's necessary. So
when you're sitting at the dinner table with your wife or your husband or your other half or whatever, or your kids, put the phone down. If it's not do or die, put the phone down. Focus on your family. You're only going to get so many days. Your kids are, teenagers or adults. Mine are too. And man, that shit flew by. Fucking flew by. And I'm just looking at pictures of them as little kids, and I'm like, where the fuck did time go? And what I realized was I spent a lot of time away from them, and I'm glad I'm there now. My point to that is just my suggestion: really evaluate the time that you're spending, because it's a healthy outlet with your family, for them and you. And yeah, the bosses are going to keep emailing you, and they're going to email you on Friday on your day off, and they're going to say, I want this by close of business today, and it's your day off, and you're going to want to do it. But if it's your day off, it's your day off. And take that time for yourself, because it will fucking break you eventually.
It absolutely will. You got to have that time for yourself. You got to have hobbies and interests that are outside of the job as well. And so it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I work out or I go to jiu-jitsu, and it's separate from my job as a cop. And yeah, that's true. But you're also working out with cops, and you're rolling with cops, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I do both of those things, and I love them. But are you really ever stepping away from it? So I also encourage people to partake in a hobby or some type of group setting that has nothing to do with law enforcement. Like if you're down with fishing,
go all in.
Go fishing. Yeah, that's one thing that's kind of been like the last little puzzle piece for me, is having that hobby outside of anything that's kind of centered around law enforcement. And for me, that's coaching. I coach track and field. And when I'm doing that, everything else kind of
coaching was my outlet too with Kai is over the years when he was playing ball, and I'm glad I had that because I got to share that with him, but I also got an outlet and there wasn't very little to no cop activity, maybe some other players and families that were cops, but it really was football on the field. So whatever your jam is, if you don't have one, go find one. And that's where coffee came about, honestly. The whole entire thing was about just finding a way to connect in a different level and find, your center, I guess, your focus again as a person. And so I think that's extremely important, especially that, for that newer supervisor, have an outlet. This cannot be your only thing for a year. You'll start out on a bad note for sure.
You'll start out on a bad note. You'll burn out. You'll end up hating it. You'll suffer, and
for sure,
the people that work for you will suffer. So, if you're trying to make this place better, you got to be dialed in when it's time to be dialed in. And if that means you got to step back for a week to recenter yourself, then so be it. Make it happen. See when you get back. For
sure. And then, so when you unplug. That's what that means. So routine, fitness, diet. Take care of your body, hydration, sleep. Draw the line. I had a really good friend, and he was a former SWAT sergeant recently, and he says a lot of crazy shit like I do. And but he said, "Yeah, you never had a line in the sand. I had a very distinct line in the sand." And I was like, you know what? That's fucking spot on. And so draw your line in the sand and what you're going to do. And I'm not saying be disobedient or insubordinate. I'm saying there's a professional boundary that you should draw, that you don't get misused and taken advantage of, especially right now. Understaffed, overworked is like under-described as to what law enforcement is going through right now. So, I know when I was there was the job I was doing at training was the equivalent of 2 and 3 supervisors. It was fucking stupid, the amount of work that was thrown at us. And
yeah, and you guys, I remember that time, you guys were running super hard, pushing out a lot of really, really good trainings, but you were bringing it to us. You know what I mean? You were putting the burden, you guys were shouldering that burden. We didn't have to go to you to get the training. You guys were coming to us. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, that is an undertaking.
It was fun to see it come together and work it out. But on the other side, they just keep asking, and they keep asking, and they keep asking. And so right now, law enforcement staffing is low, and you shouldn't be working the job. It's just dangerous and unhealthy to be working multiple positions worth of work. And so just consider that as for our listeners, if you're doing that stuff, just consider what's a priority and where you draw the line. One last thing I want to kind of talk about, that this is a pretty stressful thing, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. Officer-involved shootings, deadly force, those types of things. And you and I have both experienced them in many different ways. I would, think over the years. But your take on best piece of advice. The scene is code 4. You pulled the trigger. How do you control? What are you thinking about?
For me, I think the control and what I was thinking about, the stage was set for that years, months, days in advance prior to the incident. And it kind of comes from training and constantly thinking, or working on, your articulation of use of force, staying up to date on these things so that when the casings hit the ground, you're comfortable with the decision that you just had a fraction of a second to make. I know that's probably not quite the answer that you were looking for, but that's the way that I kind of processed it.
I have always preached for the last, 10, 15 years. The more you train, the more you do, the more you work on your craft, your skill set, and I'm not just talking about on the range, I'm talking about intellectually diving into case law, incidents, reviewing them, take it piece by piece so that when your day comes, and it will, don't ever think it won't, it will. Number one, you survive it. Number two, that's the first significant amount of stress and anxiety is when you're looking down the barrel of a gun is what's the outcome going to be for me? And, you should have the mindset of, I've got this and this isn't happening today, not to me. And so I think that's the first part. And I think the second part to that is now that I've lived through it and I've done my job, how do I explain that to these folks, what I was thinking and why and where my background comes from? And you have to be at a very high level. I thought you had to be at a very high level 5-6 years ago. That ain't shit compared to what it is now. You better know the ins and outs of lethal force or use of force now in this business. And if you don't, get the fuck out right now because you are going to go to jail. In that sense, it's pretty rough, pretty brutal, but I'm telling you right now.
No, you're spot on, and I tell people all the time, it's like, yo, dog, we don't work at Walmart. Like we're professionals here, and what that means is, you not only need to be able to handle yourself physically, in some type of physical altercation, defensive tactics, firearms, whatever, right? But we need your mind too. We need you to be able to articulate why and how and when. And, when you can put that entire package together, it's like this burden that just gets lifted off you when your day does come, because it's coming. Mm-hmm. Like you said, like it's coming. And if you think that you're going to dodge it, you're going to be the one that's going to end up getting hurt. It's the people that know it's coming, they're prepared for it. They're not out there looking for it, but when it comes, they're going to take care of business. Those are the ones that I see deal with these types of incidents the best. I'm not just talking about what's in front of them. I'm talking about the aftermath as well.
So let's talk about the aftermath a little bit. Just one final piece of stress management from your perspective. You've pulled the trigger. I've pulled the trigger. You're sitting there. You get interviewed. You do what you need to do on that end, and then you're at home with your family. There's a lot that's going to go through your mind. For instance, hopefully you've done everything right and you're very confident that your job and prosecution is not on the table, right? But, your moral compass, how does this sit with your family? Telling your wife that you just had to dump someone in the streets and they're never coming back. They're worried about you, but you're also worried am I going to be looked at differently? And my colleague's going to look at me differently because I made a few mistakes, as we all do on these things. And did I show that I can be counted on when needed? So your mind starts playing all these things in the days afterwards. You're tired, adrenaline at a massive level. And, once that subsides, your body is really tired and it starts really, at least for me, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Again, a lot of it comes down to preparation, having some type of support system, because even now there's things that I can't talk about. And even in the days, immediately after the incident, you really couldn't talk about anything at all. And some of that stuff comes before you even give like your initial interview. And it's a nerve wracking time. But I kind of fall back to some of the things that we had talked about earlier is like, all right, so my routine is going to get disrupted. I can't really control that, but I can still wake up, still work out, still do something positive. I really got to realize how cool of a place this could be when I got this outpouring of support. And I thought to myself, I was like, wow, when everybody's not acting like they're in fucking junior high, this place is still pretty cool to work at. Because just like every
Yeah.
other agency, and I'm not bad mouthing my agency. I love where I work, but every agency I've ever been around, cops act like little kids, man. But it's not until some shit really goes sideways that you get to see everybody's true colors.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool to see it. And I felt like the department, and my peers took care of me and reached out to me, and it was all good. So
Yeah,
having that system in
you
place
hit
was
on
key.
workout. I think immediately the next day when you wake up, go work out. And my thought is, get that adrenaline out of the body. Get the chemicals going in the right direction in your brain and your body. Super important. I had two people on both of mine just call me up. Hey, let's go for a run. It's kind of a thing, and it probably still is. And they didn't ask any questions. They didn't pressure me. They didn't, just, are you okay? And let's go hit it. And that was the best thing that I can remember afterwards to get some of that physical stress out,
Yeah, very similar. I had to wake up and I had to go get it, man. I was swinging a kettlebell like 4 hours after, just had to happen because I still had this energy and this adrenaline that, dude, I had to find. You got to release that somehow, otherwise it gets just bottled up inside of you. So get that workout in, clear your mind a little bit, and then get down to business, prepare. Things are a little different now. Sometimes the interviews happen day of, sometimes they happen, at a later date.
Yeah.
Get your ducks in a row.
Take the time. I think sharing it with your spouse, family is your call when it's time, when you want to do that and how you want to do that. I never shared it with my kids until some dickhead in the middle of something mentioned, hey, how many times you been in a shooting in front of my daughter? And she looked at me like, what the fuck? And, but a point to that is, there's really no right or wrong on how you explain it to your family. That's up to you. I think you should eventually share at least something with your spouse, to some degree so that they know what you're thinking and feeling. And it actually, for me, was helpful.
I agree with you, Danny, completely. My kids are a little bit older, and my kids are a little older than yours were when you were in both of your shootings, and so and times have changed. We all got cameras strapped to us now. You know what I mean? So my fear was, and I'm not one to tell war stories at the dinner table. That's just not what I do. I don't keep my family in the dark about work by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't come home and, relive my day for them either. But I thought that it was important, because things get released to the media, and what I didn't want to happen was I didn't want somebody to send them a link, 3 months, 3 years from now, like, yo, dog, is that your dad? So I thought that it was important that we watch that video as a family because it's out there. You know what I mean? And that way, if they had any questions, they could ask me right then and there. And, thankfully, I was in a place where I was comfortable enough to talk about it with them, within the confines of what I could talk about.
I think family always, their biggest concern is you're okay. Mentally, physically, spiritually, they don't give a shit about, did you go left when you should have went right? That doesn't, I don't know, at least in my experience. So I guess the point to that is don't get hung up on that necessarily. Your family usually just wants to know if you're okay. And hopefully you didn't get injured in that whole outcome.
Yeah, a big learning point for me, and like I said, I don't talk a ton about work at home, was, but I had to make that phone call to my wife at, 9:00 at night and be like, hey, I'm good. I got to turn my phone off now for the next 8 hours. I mean,
I call it the "I'm good, but" conversation. That every cop should, and you should actually. You mentioned earlier about preparation. I think you should prepare your family for that phone call. the phone call of "I'm good, but," or the phone call of "Hey, Rich is he got hurt at work." They need to mentally be prepared for that, so that panic doesn't overwhelm them when it does happen, and that they can be a good support system. At least that's just my feeling on it.
I think you're 100% spot on. I had an old team leader tell me one time that, you build these files and then you draw on them when things happen in real life, and you'd be surprised at where you can build files and what those files can contain. So
For sure.
Thank you.
For sure. So a little bit of insight from Rich on how to manage the stress. Now, granted, he's a fucking machine, so he was born that way. The rest of us have to work. But stay fit, take care of your body. We use the word machine. It is a machine, and it's going to help you perform. One of the things that we've been doing, Rich, as you know, we talked about at the shop, is the new coffee that's out that we're working on, Split Second. And the purpose of this is you train an entire career, 20 years, for that one split-second decision. And as you've experienced, you put a lot of hours, a lot of money, a lot of time into being able to survive that outcome. What we forget about in law enforcement is the minutes, hours, days, weeks, years after that incident, after your career. We don't work as hard. I was having this conversation with someone last night in a group meeting where I said, "Do you remember all the work you did leading up to going to the academy? Like, you got the job, your academy date is blah, blah, blah." I think all of us put in a massive amount of time, mentally preparing, physically, and all that. Have you prepared for retirement? Have you prepared for the end of your career? Have you put in the same effort to live the second chapter of your, that adult life after work? So this coffee, where I'm going with this, is designed to help the part of the proceeds of this coffee go into giving back to cops so that they can find time with their family, they can enjoy an outlet, and so forth. And we're starting small, hopefully going to grow it. This month has been fantastic. We've already had one recipient. Rich, you are the second. Yeah, so we're gonna get you a gift card to Stay Naked Kitchen so you can do some already done meal preps. So that next time I see you, I will have that at the shop for you. And the reason I'm doing that is Rich gives a lot, and I want Rich to, have some dinner, have some food with his family, or, help him sustain the career that he's got ahead of him. I know exactly what he's doing out there right now in the streets, and it's not easy. So thank you, Rich, for all that you do in law enforcement. When cops call 911, it's Rich and several others. They're the last line before shit goes really, really bad. And that's a heavy burden to put on a cop's shoulders, especially in 2021. So we thank you, dude. We appreciate that.
And it's my pleasure. I'd be lying if I said I don't love my job. It is difficult at times, but you know what? It's worth it. And thank you for doing what you're doing, man. You never cease to amaze me with your work ethic, and now you've redirected this focus. This Danimal focus that I've seen for like the last 17 years, and now you've redirected it into something even more positive than before with the shop and the podcast. And it just so happens that the coffee is pretty damn good too. So thank you.
I appreciate that, and just keep doing what you're doing, and we got your back, whether it's me personally or at the coffee shop. If you're a cop, we got you covered. You can always come in and grab a cup of coffee. No one will fuck with you in our place. We don't allow too many hipsters and liberals in there. We just working class people. But no, I'm kidding. But anyway, hey, my friend, thank you for your time, and we will see you on the next round, and we're going to close out with a little song. But you stay safe out there, buddy, and keep your head down. Peace.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.